Bible truth, line by line, in context, 5-minute lessons. Let's go. Welcome to Bible Bites. All right, guys, the 5-minute lesson starts now. What's going on, guys? All right, so last time we left off with Romans 2:2, we were talking about God's judgment being according to his truth, okay? Do we believe what he says about himself and that he'll do what he says he can do, okay? Now, let's keep going with Romans 2:2. There's a lot to unpack, all right? Now, remember, Romans 1:16 told us the gospel of Christ is the power of God unto salvation. And then in Romans 1:32, it shows us that all who know God's truth and do evil anyway receive death as judgment. So we are judged whether we believe God's testimony. And if we don't, we're judged to death, which is what the gospel of God saves us from, right? Death and wrath. We talked about this. Now, that means the gospel of God must give us the truth about God. We also mentioned this before, but that's crazy, right? Because the gospel of God is concerning or about his son, Jesus Christ. So it's got to give us the truth about God, and it's about his son, Jesus Christ. Context check. If the invisible things of God are apparent to us, right, to the point where we have no excuse and we are judged, but mankind says, no, I don't want to think about that, and we make up our own truth about God, and then God's judgment comes down, his death comes down for ignoring the truth he reveals through creation. What does the gospel reveal about God then? Like, we know it's about Jesus Christ, right? But what does it reveal about God through Jesus Christ? I don't know, but let's keep going. Here's another question. Is the truth revealed greater or lesser than the invisible truths revealed through creation? Because the invisible truth revealed through creation led men to death. But somehow this truth in the gospel that's about Jesus Christ leads men to life, salvation. So what is this truth, and how is it greater or lesser than the invisible truths? Don't know. Let's keep going. Romans 2:2 continued. Notice that God's judgment, his wrath, is against those which commit such things, in quotes. What things? Why is things plural? All right. Remember, Romans 1:29 gave us the list of unrighteousness, the list of sins, the list of the lusts of the heart, right? That's what those things are, and that's why they're plural. Romans 1:18, 1:21, and 1:25, it tells us why the list exists, because men hold the truth in unrighteousness. We don't glorify God nor are thankful, and we change the truth of God into a lie and worship the creature over the creator. Also remember in Romans 1:24 and 26, and then in Romans 1:32, God gave men up to the lusts of the heart, and then he judges men against that whole list of lusts of the heart. Which means even if you don't do one part of the list, but you do another part, you are doing the same things as the person you're judging, because you both are doing sin from the perspective of God, who is the only being outside of that list. We get so wrapped up about what kind of sin we're doing compared to somebody else that we forget that sin is sin in the eyes of God, and sin deserves death. Romans 2:3. Men think with their vain imaginations now that they can judge another man with God's judgment while escaping being judged for themselves. We're seeing this picture that the mind of a man is the driver here. It's the battleground. What's going on up in our head, right? Romans 1:21. Because when they knew God, right, Romans 1:22, professing themselves wise, right? But there's a second point. We see that men were judging others, thinking they themselves were immune from God's judgment. This is interesting, right? Because it shows in 132 that these men knew the judgment of God for doing the things on this list was death, and they were doing it anyway. But God gave them over to those lusts because the men did not like to keep the knowledge of God in their head. But what they weren't keeping in their head was the glory of God's authority, and also his graciousness for giving us creation. Instead, these men were lowering God's authority to equal the creation, giving his authority, God's authority, to men. And because God's judgment is death, but men were judging each other, which was a self-condemning act, Men were judging each other to death. Like a self-fulfilling circle loop, right? Feedback loop. But think about this, right? If murder was on the list of sins, that list from Romans 1:29, right? We know death, physical death already occurred. It was already happening. So how could God's judgment be death also? Remember, God gave men up, meaning anyone being murdered already, somebody walking down the street getting murdered, they were already judged to death because they were doing sins too. They were already getting judged to death and there was no gospel to save them. So does that mean God killed someone who was murdered already again? That makes no sense. Unless a death judgment means killing or destroying something other than the body. We're going to stop there. I'll talk to you next time, guys. It's heating up. Stay with me. We're going to get it. We're making it to obedience. I love you. Talk to you next time. This is Bible Bites.